Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, the pattern that has historically ended the bull market. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Link is in the description below. We have access to tons of different charts for crypto, stocks, and macro as well, so make sure you check it out. Now, we're going to just methodically go through the pattern that Bitcoin has carried out every post-halving year. And we also want to try to identify where we are within that pattern. One of the things you may notice is that Bitcoin, historically, and again, as always, historical patterns, historical moves, right? The past cannot necessarily predict the future. We must recognize that. So at the end of the day, there's a reality of no one really knows what's going to happen. But there's also a reality where Bitcoin tops near the end of post-halving years. So you will see Q4 of 2013, Q4 of 2017, and Q4 of 2021. Now, the path that took Bitcoin to each of those market cycle tops was remarkably the same. If you look closely, one of the things you'll notice with Bitcoin monthly returns is that in every post-halving year, in July and August, Bitcoin is green. You'll see in 2013, July and August were green. And in 2017, July and August were green. And in 2021, July and August were green. And so far in 2025, July and August are green. You'll also notice that in 2013, 2017, and 2021, September was red. And then in every one of those post-election years, post-halving years, October was green after the pullback in September. So the way this historically works, and we'll go through it cycle by cycle, is Bitcoin goes up in July and August, gets a pullback, generally speaking, to the bull market support band in September, and then goes into the market cycle top in Q4 of the post-halving year, which sets up the midterm year bear market. Okay? So what you have here is up in July through August, right? You can see that pretty clearly right here, up in July and August. And then a pullback in September. You can see that right there. And that pullback bottoms around the bull market support band. And then, after you get that September pullback, what has historically happened? You then get the final rally into the market cycle top. Okay? And what you'll notice is that this pattern actually repeats itself, right? So again, you have up in July and August, the pullback in September to the bull market support band, the final rally into the market cycle top, and then you put in your final market cycle top in Q4 of the post-halving year, which then sets up the midterm year bear market. All right? So that is the 2013 cycle peak. And you can see how this pattern will repeat itself in the next cycle. So let's just go through it. So first of all, we have up in July and August, right? Here's July and August, right? Up in July and August. And then you get your pullback. Where to? Glad you asked. The bull market support band. So you get your pullback in September to that 20-week SMA, just like in 2013. And then what happens after that? You got your final rally into the market cycle top, right? So you got your final rally right here after that September pullback. You see that? And then what happened in Q4 of 2017? Just like in 2013, you got your market cycle top, which then set up the midterm year bear market, right? So to draw the same thing out, it was up in July and August, a pullback in September, a rally into the market cycle top in Q4, followed by the midterm year bear market. So what happened in 2013 and in 2014 in terms of the pattern was the same thing that happened in 2017 and 2018, right? The pattern was the same. Now, let's go see. All right, once it happened, great. 2 times, fine. 3 times, let's go take a look. Did Bitcoin go up in July and August? Over here. Absolutely, right? We already showed it on the monthly returns. Up right here, July and August. So up in July and August, right? Same old thing, same as it always does in post-election years. And then you got a pullback in September. And guess where the pullback was to? I'm glad you asked again, right? It was the bull market support band at 20-week SMA. And then after that, we got the final rally into the market cycle top. And the market cycle top occurred in Q4 of 2021. So to draw it out, like we did the others, up in July and August, pull back to the 20-week SMA in September, market cycle top Q4 of the post-election year, post-halving year, which then set up the midterm year bear market, right? So now we have this pattern playing out 3 times, right? It's now played out 3 times, where every post-halving year, that's how the cycle has ultimately ended. How's it going this time? Well, let's go take a look, right? So far, we already know if you look at the monthly returns, Bitcoin has gone up in July, and August is still, not even halfway through. So the jury is still out on whether that will remain green. But if it does, let's suppose it plays out like the historical pattern, right? So up in July and August, pull back to the 20-week SMA in September, if it repeats how it always has, and then up into whatever the market cycle top is going to be. I have no idea, but I'll stick to the risk metric, which would then probably set up the midterm year bear market, right? Something like that. Now, I don't know exactly where that top is going to be, but I will say there has been a pattern of diminishing returns, unfortunately. And if you take a price range from every September pullback, you'll notice that after the let me go to the first cycle first, right? After the first cycle from the 20-week SMA in September, Bitcoin then rallied about 1,000% to then put in the market cycle top. In the cycle after that, it rallied about 500% after the September pullback. In the cycle after that, from the September pullback, it rallied about 70%. Okay? So the bull market support band in September will likely be higher than it is now. Currently, the bull market support band for Bitcoin ranges from around 105 to 107K. So maybe in September, that 20-week SMA could correspond to around 110K, plus or minus a few $1,000s, right? Plus or minus a few K. $110,000 plus or minus a few thousand. What's a few $1,000s, my friends, right? So then it would set up a potential final rally into the market cycle top. Now, let's suppose that the 20-week SMA hits around 110K here in a few weeks. And then let's suppose Bitcoin gets a pullback to that level after hopefully first rallying up higher. Where would that put Bitcoin? Well, A 20% rally from 110K puts it at 131. And there's a chance that it goes to 130 before you get a pullback for the 20-week estimate, right? Let's just go through it, right? 20% from there would be 131. 30% from there would be 143. 40% from there would be 154. Okay. Now, last cycle, it was 70% up, and that would put Bitcoin all the way up at 186. Now, if you subscribe to the diminishing returns view, then what that would suggest is that it might be hard for Bitcoin to get up to that level if the diminishing returns idea as measured from September plays out. It could theoretically go higher than that, and the overall market cycle ROI still exhibit diminishing returns. But I just wanted to show this pattern to everyone, not because I'm suggesting that it has to play out, because it doesn't have to. Anything can always happen in markets, whether you like it, doesn't really matter. Whether I like it, doesn't matter. The market does not care about your feelings or my feelings. All we can do is be a student to the market and try to learn from it as we grow older, learn from our mistakes. If you don't learn from your mistakes, you're basically just destined to repeat them. So I'm just thinking, hey, if we're sitting here and it's the end of August and Bitcoin is doing pretty good and it just feels like there's no stopping it, I'm going to be thinking, look, guys, every single September we get that pullback to the 20-week SMA. And then if that happens, it would likely be scary, not really for Bitcoin, but you know what would be scary for? It'd be scary for the altcoin market, because I think, notice how Bitcoin keeps moving and altcoins can't seem to do anything. Why is that? Why is it that Ethereum keeps doing well, but altcoins are not? Well, I'm glad you asked. Again, it's because altcoins never went to their range lows, whereas ETH already went home. So arguably the reason you're seeing that altcoin weakness, people keep saying it's manipulation this, manipulation that. That's just a narrative because they got caught on the wrong side of the market, right? They probably would prefer had they stuck with Bitcoin and Ethereum at this point. Instead, they're watching their altcoins just bleed both Bitcoin and Ethereum over the long haul, so they scream out manipulation. But I'm telling you, the main reason is not due to that. It's just due to the fact that alts never went down to the lows on their Bitcoin pairs, which I think is going to happen probably, within the next couple of months. You can see in 2017, it actually happened in late October, early November. So I'm still expecting that ultimately to play out. And of course, the reason why Ethereum already has gone through that, the reason why ETH Bitcoin is already doing so well is because, well, Ethereum went home, right? Whereas alts never went to the range lows. So again, that's how I think this is ultimately going to play out. So watch out for that. Again, it's that September pullback that will likely start the process of alts bleeding back to Bitcoin. But it would likely be a potential rally after that September pullback that would then be responsible for the altcoins going lower on their Bitcoin pairs. Again, people always want to know, do alts go down against Bitcoin because Bitcoin's going up or because Bitcoin's going down? And the answer is yes, right? They go down against Bitcoin no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. You're probably tired of hearing me say it. That's the way the cycle works. And especially that's the way the cycle works when you're at higher interest rates like we are this cycle. Now, next cycle, maybe it'll play out a little bit differently. Maybe Bitcoin dominance will top sooner next cycle. I actually think that's the most likely scenario for next cycle. But for this cycle, obviously, it was mostly just a Bitcoin-led cycle. And it's just a reminder, as always, that Bitcoin leads the bull market, not the altcoins. And a lot of people spend years yearning for that alt season that only lasts for a few weeks, maybe a few months at most. And then for the rest of the 4 years of the cycle, you basically just see Bitcoin lead. Again, Bitcoin leads the bull market. After Ethereum goes home, which it did in April, it then joins in. When do altcoins join in? Well, they join in after they go to the range lows on their Bitcoin pairs, which still has not actually happened. So again, I'm not saying altcoins can't go up on their Bitcoin pairs until about late August. They're still likely going to try to catch a bid. But the point that a lot of people are missing is that they're just bleeding to Ethereum during that time. And now they're on about 50% against Ethereum since Ethereum went home. So this is the pattern, right? The pattern that we just talked about. That is the pattern of how all Bitcoin bull markets have ended. up in July and August, a September pullback, a rally in October, and then you get some type of market cycle top sometime in Q4. That's how it's always happened. Could this time be different? It could be, but sometimes, if it's not broke, why try and fix it? And, the question that I know that I'll see down in the comment section below is, what would make Bitcoin go down in the midterm year? It could be on any number of things, but I really do subscribe to the idea that narrative follows price, not the other way around. So if you just look at the chart, you can see that Bitcoin always does poorly in midterm years, even though it does really well in July and August, and then Q4 of post-halving years. So whatever the reason is that if Bitcoin goes up from here, there's going to be a narrative to follow it, whether it be treasury companies, whether it be ETF flows, whether it be, the administration talking about it, right? There's always going to be a narrative to support it. What could be the narrative for next year? I know a lot of people think, it could be a lot of different things, but what I think it might actually be next year could just be, we might find ourselves in a situation where the Fed is just not willing to lower rates as much as the markets really want them to. They'll probably lower rates this year, just like they did last year. But you might get into a situation where they just can't lower them as much as maybe the market would want, and the reason could be that the long end of the yield curve might revolt when that happens, just like last year, and I did a video about this, if anyone's interested, about the real estate market a few days ago. And there's this common misconception that a lot of people have that the Fed cutting rates would then lead to mortgage rates going down, but that's not actually true. If you look at mortgage rates, if you look at the 10-year yield, we know that the Fed cut rates for the first time this cycle in September of 2024. And when they cut, the 10-year yield went up, right? It went up a lot. In fact, it rallied from 3.6% to 4.8% while the Fed was cutting rates. And so, if you think about it, if the Fed cuts rates again next month, then there's a decent chance that the 10-year yield rallies again. So maybe that's the narrative. You truly get your higher for longer. And it's one of those things that the Fed's not necessarily going to be able to fix, right? A lot of people think the easy solution is just to lower rates. But it's not so simple, right? If the Fed lowers rates too aggressively, the bond market will revolt and the long end of the yield curve will go higher, making it even more difficult for people to get mortgages. And if that happens, if the Fed lowers, last year the Fed lowered rates and the long end of the yield curve went up and mortgage rates got more expensive, right? Mortgage rates went up. A lot of people have forgotten about that, right? And now people are saying the same thing again, right? They're saying, all right, lower rates, fix the housing market. I think if the Fed lowers rates again, let's say a couple of times this year, and the 10-year yield goes up, then the market might start to, get the memo that you can't just lower rates to fix all our problems, right? You have to have other mechanics. There's a lot of other mechanics at work. And so I think there's going to be some type of complication with that might set up the 2026, the potential 2026 bear market for Bitcoin. But again, that doesn't mean that Bitcoin can't go higher between now and then. It just means that, when you get to next year, just remember, a lot of people are going to be screaming certain things, but there's a good chance that the narrative does change, and it'll likely change if the price of Bitcoin starts going down. But that's not where we are just yet. I think right now we're still in that August phase where the markets generally go up in post-halving years. Likely going to see a pullback in September, and then likely that will then lead into the final rally to the market cycle top, if history is any indication. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Link is in the description below. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.